The painting arrived at the old estate on a fog-soaked morning in late October. No one knew who had sent it or why it bore the address of the abandoned house on the hill. The delivery man claimed it was already paid for, his hands trembling as he left it on the doorstep before vanishing down the road. The box was large, wrapped in black cloth, and sealed with red wax that looked disturbingly like dried blood. When the caretaker, Mr. Alcott, found it later that day, he hesitated. The estate had been empty for years, its halls echoing only with the moans of the wind. But curiosity outweighed fear, and with a trembling hand, he broke the seal and unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a portrait of a woman, pale, elegant, and hauntingly real. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, and though the painting was clearly centuries old, the paint on her pupils seemed wet, alive. Mr. Alcott couldn't look away. There was something magnetic about her face, something sorrowful yet sinister. The nameplate at the bottom read, Lady Evelyn Blackwood, 1789. He didn't recognize the name, though he'd worked in the region for 40 years and knew most of its local legends. Still, he hung the painting in the grand hall, thinking it would give the place a touch of class. That night, as rain lashed against the windows and thunder rolled in the distance, Alcott woke to the sound of footsteps echoing through the corridor. He grabbed his lantern and stepped out of his room, calling out into the darkness. No reply, only the faint whisper of the wind. As he turned toward the grand hall, he froze. The painting was glowing. A faint shimmer surrounded the woman's figure, and her eyes, those gray, lifeless eyes, were now fixed directly on him. Not just in that usual painted way. No, he felt her stare. It was cold, deliberate, almost human. He took a step closer, raising the lantern. Her lips, he was sure of it, curved slightly upward. Not a smile of warmth, but of recognition. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the mansion soaked in silence. Mr. Alcott tried to convince himself that what he saw the night before was just a trick of the light, perhaps lightning or exhaustion. Yet, every time he walked through the grand hall, he felt her eyes following him. Not in the way all paintings seem to do, but as though she shifted her gaze when he moved. He decided to test it. He stood at one end of the hall, staring into her eyes for a full minute. Then, slowly, he walked across the room, never breaking his gaze. Her eyes followed him, smoothly, deliberately. He froze, a chill crawling up his spine. "It's impossible," he whispered. "It's paint, just paint." But later that afternoon, he noticed something even more disturbing. The woman's expression had changed, ever so slightly, her lips now parted, as if she were about to speak. Her eyes seemed glossier, like tears forming. He rubbed his own eyes, blinked, but the change remained. He covered the painting with a sheet, muttering, "Out of sight, out of mind." But that night, while he lay in bed, the wind carried a faint sound down the corridor. A voice, distant yet distinct. "Why did you hide me, Mr. Alcott?" He bolted upright, heart pounding, staring into the dark hallway outside his door. The voice came again, this time closer. "Look at me." The lantern by his bedside flickered, then went out completely, and in the pitch-black silence, he swore he could feel someone, or something, standing just beyond the door. For the next 3 days, Mr. Alcott refused to enter the hall. He stayed mostly in his small servants' quarters, eating little and keeping the lamps lit even during the day. But strange things began happening nonetheless. Objects moved slightly when he wasn't looking. Chairs angled differently, curtains swaying without breeze. One morning, he found muddy footprints on the stairs. Bare feet, small, delicate ones like a woman's. Finally, his fear turned into anger. "Enough!" he shouted one evening, storming into the hall. The sheet he'd thrown over the painting was gone. Lady Evelyn stared back at him again, her eyes glinting like wet glass. "What do you want from me?" he demanded. At that, the faintest whisper echoed from the frame, soft as breath. "Remember me." He stumbled backward, knocking over a table. "You're not real," he gasped. But the whisper grew stronger, turning into sobs. "Remember what he did to me." What they did. Before he could react, his lantern flickered, illuminating something new at the bottom of the painting. A faint red stain smeared along the edge of the frame, still wet. He froze in horror as the smell hit him. It wasn't paint, it was blood. Mr. Alcott's hands trembled as he reached toward the frame. The red smear looked fresh, thick, glistening under the flickering light. When he touched it, his fingers came away sticky. His breath caught in his throat. Blood. Real, warm blood. His pulse pounded in his ears as he stumbled back, staring at his stained hand. Then, the air in the hall changed. It grew heavy, suffocating. He could hear faint whispers seeping from the walls, dozens of voices overlapping, murmuring unintelligibly, like prayers or pleas. He spun around, heart racing, but no one was there. Still, the whispers surrounded him, rising and falling like waves. When he turned back toward the painting, the woman's expression had shifted again. Her eyes were filled with fury now, and her mouth curved into something between a snarl and a smile. From the corners of the canvas, thin red lines began to run down. More blood. They streaked across her painted dress, staining it dark crimson. Suddenly, the chandelier above him shook violently. Dust and glass rained down as the chains groaned. Mr. Alcott ran for the door, but it slammed shut before he could reach it. The whispers became screams, high-pitched and desperate. He clutched his head, yelling, "Stop it! Stop it!" Then silence. A stillness so complete it made his ears ring. The chandelier stopped shaking. The painting looked normal again. The blood was gone. The eyes calm. It was as if nothing had happened. But when he turned to leave, he noticed a trail of bloody footprints, small, delicate, and fresh, leading up the staircase toward his bedroom. That night, Mr. Alcott sat awake in bed, every candle lit. He could hear faint creaks along the old wooden floor above him, footsteps that didn't belong to him. He counted each one, breath held. Then silence, followed by the faint sound of someone humming. A woman's voice, sweet, mournful. He gripped the edge of his blanket, trembling. "Who's there?" he whispered. The humming stopped instantly. For several seconds, there was nothing but the ticking of the clock on his nightstand. Then knock, knock, knock. 3 soft taps at his door. He froze. His voice barely escaped his throat. "Go away!" But the door slowly creaked open. A gust of cold air swept in, extinguishing every candle. Moonlight spilled through the window, and in its glow stood a figure, tall, graceful, her hair cascading over her shoulders like black silk. He recognized the face immediately, Lady Evelyn. She was no longer trapped in the painting. Her eyes glistened, filled with sorrow and rage. "You shouldn't have covered me," she said softly, her voice echoing like it came from deep underwater. "Now they all know you're here." "Who?" he stammered. Her expression darkened. "The others, the ones buried beneath the house." Before he could react, shadows began to crawl across the walls, dozens of them writhing, whispering, reaching out. He screamed, backing against the wall, as ghostly hands clawed toward him. Lady Evelyn smiled faintly. "It's too late, Mr. Alcott. You've already joined us." Days passed, and no one saw Mr. Alcott again. The townsfolk assumed he had traveled back to London for business, but the caretaker knew better. Every night, lights flickered in the old manor, and faint cries echoed through the valley. Sometimes, the window of the main hall would glow faintly red, as if something alive pulsed behind it. Inside the house, dust began to move, not by the wind, but as if the house itself was breathing. The curtains swayed with invisible rhythm. The floors creaked with slow, deliberate pulses. The portrait of Lady Evelyn still hung in the hall, but now her image seemed slightly blurred. Her eyes appeared deeper, darker, and sometimes they blinked. One stormy night, the caretaker, Henry, decided to enter. He carried a lantern and whispered prayers under his breath. As he stepped into the grand hall, he immediately smelled iron, the thick scent of blood. His lantern light flickered across the painting. Evelyn's mouth was open now, twisted into a silent scream. He turned to leave, but the doors slammed shut behind him. The air grew freezing cold. From the walls came faint knocking, slow, rhythmic, like someone trapped inside, begging to be let out. The knocking became louder, then frantic. Henry dropped the lantern, and the room plunged into darkness. The last thing anyone heard from him was his scream, long, sharp, and then abruptly cut off. When dawn came, the front door of the manor stood wide open. The painting was clean again, but the woman inside it now had Henry's eyes. A month later, a young historian named Clara arrived in the village. She had heard rumors about the Alcott estate and its living painting. Her fascination with cursed art drove her to see it for herself. The villagers begged her not to go. "The house eats those who enter," they warned. But Clara didn't believe in ghosts. As she entered the manor, the stench of decay hit her like a wave. Every portrait in the hallway seemed to watch her, their painted eyes following her movements. She noticed faint blood stains on the floorboards, shaped like footprints leading toward the grand staircase. Her heartbeat quickened, but her curiosity outweighed her fear. She stood before Lady Evelyn's portrait. It was breathtakingly beautiful and deeply wrong. The woman's eyes looked too alive, her lips faintly curved as if holding a secret. Clara reached into her bag and took out her camera, wanting to document the legendary piece. The moment the flash went off, the lights in the house dimmed. A low groan echoed through the walls. Then, Clara's camera screen showed not just the painting, but a second figure standing behind her. A tall, shadowed woman with long black hair. Clara turned slowly, heart pounding. No one there. But when she looked back at the painting, Lady Evelyn was smiling wide. And now, the painted version of Clara stood beside her, frozen forever inside the frame. Years later, an art dealer named Victor Langdon purchased the abandoned Alcott estate, unaware of its history. He saw the painting as a masterpiece worth millions. When workers entered to clear the manor, several refused to touch the portrait, claiming it watched them. Victor laughed it off and had it moved to his London gallery. From the moment it was hung, strange things began to happen. Visitors reported cold drafts, whispers, and a faint humming sound that came from nowhere. One evening, the gallery's security cameras caught movement, Lady Evelyn's eyes shifting toward the lens. Victor dismissed it as lighting trickery until one night, while locking up, he heard soft footsteps echoing in the empty gallery. He turned to see a faint reflection in the glass, a woman's figure standing beside the painting. Her eyes met his, and for a moment he couldn't move. Then, in the reflection, her hand reached out, not from the glass, but from the frame itself. The next morning, the gallery was empty. The painting hung in its usual place. But now, two figures stood inside it, Lady Evelyn and Victor Langdon, frozen mid-scream. Months after Victor's disappearance, the gallery closed, and the painting was sold at auction to an anonymous buyer. The new owner, a reclusive baron named Edgar Wainwright, kept it hidden in his mansion outside Bristol. No one ever saw him again in public, but servants whispered that he spent hours locked in his study, talking to the portrait. Rumors spread that Lady Evelyn's whispers could be heard echoing through the hallways, that the painting's eyes glowed red when the moon was full. One maid claimed she saw a woman step out of the frame one night, glide silently down the corridor, and vanish into the walls. The next morning, that same maid was gone. Weeks passed, and Edgar's behavior grew more erratic. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping, and his journals filled with frantic notes. "She speaks my name now." One stormy night, a thunderclap shattered the silence. A neighbor, passing by, saw the mansion windows flashing with red light. The following morning, the servants found the study door locked from the inside. When the police forced it open, the room was empty, except for the painting. Lady Evelyn's hand was now resting on the shoulder of a man inside the frame. His eyes were wide with terror. The plaque beneath it read simply, "Edgar Wainwright, 1892. The painting resurfaced again in 1923, this time in a private collection in Paris. Art critics called it the most unsettling portrait in existence. Those who viewed it claimed to feel watched, even followed. Some reported nightmares of a pale woman whispering through cracked glass. One critic, Pierre Leclerc, wrote in his final column, "Her eyes follow me, even in my sleep." He was found dead 2 days later, his body cold, his face contorted in silent horror. The painting was missing from his studio, vanished without a trace. Decades later, the legend persisted. From London to Prague, from museums to hidden auctions, Lady Evelyn's portrait appeared and disappeared, always after a death. No one could keep it for long. Every owner eventually vanished or went mad. Today, the last known sighting was online. A blurry photo posted by an anonymous user showing the same portrait, hanging in a dimly lit room. The post read only, "It watches me too." Within hours, the account was deleted. But the image remains, floating across forums and dark web archives, always followed by strange comments like, "I saw her blink," and maybe, right now, as you read these words, her painted eyes are finding you too. They say the painting still exists, hidden somewhere, waiting for someone curious enough to find it. Some claim they've seen her eyes move through the glass. Others swear they heard her whisper their name. Maybe it's just a story, or maybe every time you look at a painting, she's looking back. So, if you ever see a portrait of a pale woman with dark eyes and a faint smile, don't stare too long, because she never blinks.